Good morning.
Morning, everybody. Sorry, I think there was a load shedding problem.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. There has definitely been a load shedding problem this morning, but we're up and running now, so that's fantastic. Let me just get everybody in, and then we can start. Stephen, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you, Iva?
I'm fine, thank you. How's the Pretoria rash?
It's mad. I'm looking forward to 22.
I didn't say rush, I said rash.
Oh, rash. Okay. So we haven't found the ointment for it yet.
Yes, can you imagine? And it's only going to start soon. I tell you that next week we've got the water problem. So this week's the electricity, next week's the water. Okay, everybody is in, we can begin. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, while everybody is joining, let me start off by saying that this isn't going to be an extremely long session, and thank you very much for your patience. But basically what we are doing today is we are literally telling it like it is as of, and please forgive me for saying this, but as of yesterday, when the latest actually statement came out from the government department clarifying the regulation. Can I please ask you to mute your microphone so that we can begin? All right. So, and Tara will, I've asked Tara to please circulate the regulation interpretation notes as they have come out from various organizations. But the way things stand at the moment is this. And let me be very, very simplistic about how I am stating what I'm stating. The focus of the regulation, section 18 of the regulation is this. It is that the producer of the containers which are dumped into the marketplace once they've been used are dumped from the marketplace in an uncontrollable fashion, that the producers of those containers are the liable and accountable people in terms of section 18, not, and I want to emphasize again, not the filler of the containers. So let me start off by saying this. The only time that the filler of a container is accountable and therefore has to register as a producer in terms of section 18, has to register as a producer of the material used for containers, the only time is if it is a fully imported container. It doesn't necessarily have to be filled, but a fully imported container where the producer of the container, cannot be held liable here in South Africa. Where the producer of the container is identifiable in South Africa, there is absolutely no compunction on the filler of the container to have to take any responsibility whatsoever for waste disposal, except in one regard. And that regard is this: except when it comes to holding the producer of the container accountable for showing that they have registered as a producer, and more importantly, in registering as a producer, that they have a certificate to attest to the fact that they are registered as a producer, and as a producer that they have also signed up with a waste disposal company. So as you can see on the screen, it is about accountability. It is about the accountability of the container and packaging producer. Okay. The only exception is for fully imported product or containers, because the producer of the container is not accountable or cannot be held responsible. Okay. So I want to pause at this stage because that is the sum total. That's the sum total of the regulation. That accountability is of the container and packaging producer, not the manufacturer. Accountability is of the container and packaging producer to register as a producer and then to register with a waste disposal solution. That is the beginning and the end of this regulation. So the consequence is for a local manufacturer who sources containers and packaging locally, that they have to obtain from their supplier of packaging a certificate of producer and disposal registration. That's all that you have to do. I know you've been told that you have to register, but that's only because of how wishy-washy the regulations were, but that now has been clarified. So that's the first consequence. The consequence for a local supplier importing is that that supplier has to register as a producer and register with a waste disposal company. That's the sum total of it. And the reason is accountability, nothing else.
Can I ask a quick question, please?
Yes, please.
Hi, good morning, all. It's Nirat here. Just your comment on this, the supplier for a local supplier importing, right? So I just want to understand because terminology can throw us in the wrong direction. On
well,
this.
It has already, yeah.
It has exactly my point. So, but are you insinuating? And let's think about an example, right? So, if you have the food, for example, importing in metal packaging from it's an already converted form from a supplier in Europe.
You, the importer, are responsible for registering as the producer of that packaging because you are an agent of who you buy the product from, because who you buy the product from is not accountable in South Africa. They have no local footprint in South Africa.
Okay, so it's not the intermediary that's importing the can or the pail-in. It is the manufacturer of the paint, basically.
No, hold on. No, sorry.
So that's what I want to know.
Okay. So let me answer you this way.
Sure.
If there is an agency that is importing packaging and then on selling that packaging to you, the manufacturer,
right?
It is the agent that is importing the manufacturing who has to register as the producer. And prove that they've registered with a waste disposal plant. Where you do not have a certificate from that agency to attest to the fact that they have registered as a producer, you are liable as the manufacturer. As the filler, you then become liable for doing that.
Okay, all right. Okay, got it. And that's only in the case of, when an agency is importing material from an external third-party source.
Yes, and you can understand why, because that external third-party source is not accountable in South Africa. Ultimately, someone wants to count the number of particular cans or particular product on a waste dump and say that this has been brought here by this company, which is putting it into the marketplace. And we want to hold that company accountable.
Okay, all right, got it.
Now, what the department... Yes, Sarah?
There's one other hand up. I don't know who it is. It's U576193 user.
Jackson from NCP. I would just like to ask a question. What about if that container is a steel container and then you keep on reusing the container? You don't give it to anyone, it's your own property. You don't dispose it. The only time you dispose it, that's when you scrap it to your scrap dealers.
So the only time you have to register is if you do over 3 tons a year of that product onto the marketplace.
10 tons, sorry. Ivan.
Sorry, 10 tons, 10 tons. When I say 3 tons, I'm thinking where there are multiples that are working together. But if it's one company, the only time you have to register is if you do more than 10 tons a year of that container, not the product, of the container onto the marketplace.
Disposing, referring to disposing.
Disposal, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you have the containers and you're keeping the containers and recycling them internally for use, in other words, you're cleaning them and reusing them, et cetera, you do not have to register until such time as the amount of product you're working with that you ultimately are putting into the marketplace is more than 10 tons.
Hi.
Yes, hi. That's Zanele.
Yes, Zanele. Then my question will be, then who makes the arrangements? Is it the service provider, or the manufacturer that then has to collate these things back for recycling or the safe disposal of? Because remember, the public, they'll buy and then they use and then it ends up in the waste, in the area.
So let me just use I'm just going to use an example. Let's say, for example, it's Plascon, just for argument's sake. And let's say Plascon get their container from Nampak. Nampak registers as the producer of the container, because remember, it's not being the producer of the product that is the issue. It's the producer of the container. Nampak registers as the producer of the container. Nampak then at the same time has to register with AB's Waste Disposal Company. AB's Waste Disposal Company is responsible for the recycling of the container.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your question is quite appropriate, because if the company that's putting it into the marketplace buys the product from Nampak, puts it into the marketplace, between the company and Nampak, there have to be waste disposal sites or waste disposal tips that are made available so that a member of the public is able to dispose of the product, and then AB's Waste Disposal Company can come collect the tip and recycle the product.
So we have a bit of a responsibility as the user or the feeler, as you've termed it, to work with our waste disposal companies, and because we've got a number of landfill sites, number one. So that means myself and Nampak needs to come up with a plan as to how is this going to come back to us and how we're going to partner with the landfill sites in order to get these containers back.
Well, Zanella, what you should be saying is, Mr. Nampak, I buy my containers from you. You need to satisfy me. You need to satisfy me that because you are the producer of those containers, you have a mechanism in place to dispose of the containers, either because you're doing it yourself or you're doing it through a recycling plant. So you, the filler, simply have to insist on the solution. You don't have to be accountable or responsible for the solution.
Okay, that is what I wanted to determine as to in terms of liability. Do I have a level of liability, or it's for me to make sure that during my assessment in terms of does Nampak have everything in order, all the systems and plans in place to make sure that, okay, no, I'm hearing you clearly. Thank you.
One of the things that SAPMA is going to be asking you to consider is this. So as our manufacturers in SAPMA, we want to give you peace of mind, but we also want to give the authorities peace of mind that we have a control over this thing. So what we want to do is and this will be offered to you before the end of February, we want to give you a QR code to put onto every tin of paint when you have an opportunity to put it onto a tin of paint, or onto point of sale banners or point of sale posters that says, scanning this QR code will give you, the consumer, access to the code for the producer of the plastic that the producers have to keep to, the code for the disposal of the plastic or the containers that the recyclers have to keep to, and a public charter in terms of the commitment of the entire industry and sector to the climate, whatever you want to call it. So there will be a QR code, and as long as you've got that QR code and your supplier, in other words, Nampak in the example I used, your supplier, as well as that recycler, are all subscribers to the SAPMA database of producers and disposal plants, okay, then you, the manufacturer, are covered in this instance by what you have under that QR code on your tin. That's the program we're currently working on. In other words, where we hold every registered producer of the container and every registered disposer of the container, excuse my word, it's a neologism, but you understand what I'm saying, of that container, where we hold them, they subscribe to the scheme, and eventually they will be quality controlled for what and whether they do what they say they're doing. So that you, the manufacturer, who buy the product from that supplier, have peace of mind that you're walking on the right side of the regulation, not the wrong side of the regulation.
Kiwi, I think your hand is up unless your question has been answered.
I've got a question. Thank you. Thank you. That clarifies some things. I've got a question. So the producer of the containers is the one that is responsible for accounting for the 10,000 10,000 tons, you say, or not the agent. Who is accountable of monitoring the amount of packaging that is going into the market?
Well, the department is taking the declaration from every registered producer that it's 10 tons. The department the department is eventually, well, we know that the department has said to SAPMA, that they want SAPMA eventually to account as an association for what members are placing in the market and the disposal activity. Now, we've said that this isn't the responsibility of the associations, but this is the current debate that's going on. We're going on a voluntary basis to begin next year early to start putting into place this mechanism, but it might take a little bit of time.
Okay. And then one last one, I know it might be a little bit off topic, but more related to packaging, like especially in paint industries, we also have challenges of broken packaging or paint packaging, like paint buckets, or you know, sometimes they break and you end up accumulating a lot of packaging, of which producers might not be willing to take because they will be like, you know, broken, and they won't be able to reuse or do anything with it. And so from an agent point of view, we are forced to find a way to dispose of them. Does this, you know, is this included in this whole equation?
If you are the filler and you've brought packaging from, I'm just going to, again, please excuse me, I know they're going to both sue me, but let's say you're Plascon that's filling paint into a container, and you've bought the container from Nampak. Yes. Nampak have to satisfy you that there is a waste disposal mechanism in place. The waste disposal mechanism relates not only to the empty container, but equally to the container which is broken and therefore cannot be reused.
Okay, that's good. Because what ends up...
Sorry, yes, sorry.
What ends up happening is that there is a lot of people that are, a lot of recyclers that are emerging, some legal, some illegal. So if it's not controlled properly, it ends up in the wrong hands. So at least if it's controlled like that, it's much better in my view.
You're completely correct. And like I say, our job collectively now, the manufacturers and the suppliers, our job collectively through SAPMA is to put in place a mechanism where we enforce with us the registration of the producer of the plastic. We enforce the registration of the disposal company of that plastic and metal container, etc. Because remember, it's not just plastic we're talking about. and that we implement a quality assurance mechanism, even if via a third party, for the assurance and peace of mind of our members, the manufacturers and suppliers, who simply by placing that QR code on your final product that you're putting into the marketplace can say, we've dispensed with our obligation, we've exhausted our obligation in this regard in relation to Section 18. Eventually, we will have an opportunity to have all of the producers and to have all of the waste disposal companies to have their certificates on the SAPMA site, so that when you subscribe to the SAPMA site for waste disposal, you automatically have access to those certificates so that you have peace of mind, because it's all very well for a producer to give you a certificate, but you don't know if it's valid or not.
Sean, I don't know if your hand is an old hand or if you've got a question still. Sean, you're still on mute.
Sorry, I was struggling to unmute.
Oh,
I'm not used to Zoom.
how's it, Sean? How are you doing?
I'm good, Ivan.
Yeah,
Just a question.
you don't mind me picking on Plascon, do you?
No issue. Okay, so Ivan, I mean, we really sticky when it comes to what goes on our packs, and it's pretty much driven from a global perspective as well. So chances are we would not want to put a QR code on our pack, you know, regarding this. So what I want to know, is there a requirement that we prove on pack that we party to this sort of initiative? Is that a requirement, or do we not need to put anything on pack, and we can rather have something on a website? Or
so you don't have to put on a pack. You can put on point of sale, so you can have a poster or a banner about waste disposal. Or alternatively, you can very definitely have it on your website. However, we are aware of the fact that the second stage of the negotiation is very much going to be about how you explain to the consumer, not your responsibility or your obligation in terms of waste disposal, but their role in waste disposal. Because remember, it's all very well to have Nampak who registers as a producer for Plascon, and it's all very well to have Nampak that then contracts with AB for waste disposal of the containers. But if there is no mechanism in place for how the consumer is told to get their container to AB, then in fact, you haven't completed the chain of responsibility.
Okay. It's
So
more about educating them on what to do with your pack once they've used the product in the can.
yes. So for example, in your instance, it's Dulux says to you that when you've finished the 20 liters of paint, please take it back to the retailer that you brought it from in the first place, because we have made arrangements with AB to fetch the container from that retailer or to have a tip outside the retailer for the disposal of these containers. But we've made arrangements to get the last mile of the disposal process, to be operationalizing that last mile.
Okay, good, thank you.
But we do believe that those manufacturers who are able to place a QR code directly on their tin are implementing the Rolls-Royce of communication back to your clients or your customers, the user of your product, and therefore are absolutely exhausting your obligation.
Clear, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Any other questions? Tara?
Yeah.
Sorry, yes?
I just wanted to say, also on another hand, just looking at it on another angle, won't that also create a reluctance from an urgent point of view, where you know your tea or whatever you are doing, you just send everything back to the producer, and you're no longer responsible for the waste that is being produced? Like, how is that relationship going to be, you know, like established between the producer and the agent to ensure there is equal responsibility from both parties?
Well,
What is the?
I think that is the nature of the relationship you have with the supplier of the container, who is the producer, that you need to be certain that if you are, buying some of that 10 tons of container that Nampak is putting into the marketplace, that Nampak has convinced you that they have a responsible recycling process that they've contracted into. And from a quality assurance point of view, that is one of the reasons why we are saying from SAPMA's perspective down the line, that depending on whether or not our manufacturers and their producers subscribe to the system we're talking about, we would be in a position, even on a third-party basis, to outsource the quality assessment and the reporting of what is happening via those waste disposal plants. Because ultimately, the departments, all the government departments are saying to SAPMA, you have 300 or 400 manufacturing companies that are your members. You have to be accountable for their reporting. They're reporting on the amount of product they're putting into the marketplace, how the cans are being disposed of, and whether or not there's quality assurance of that disposal process. One of the last remaining confusing issues is that in the regulation, everything has now been made clear that the accountable party is the producer of the plastic. That's fine. But then they talk about unless it is a brand owner. And that has been very confusing up until now. And what we have determined is that what they mean by that is not that it's a brand owner of what the filler is, in other words, the paint, but it's a brand owner of the kind of packaging. So let's say, for argument's sake, that you have asked Consul Glass, I'm being ridiculous now, but you've asked Consul Glass to manufacture a particular container for you, which is patented under your brand or under their brand, but it's different to their strawberry or vanilla line of containers any Tom, Dick, or Harry could buy from them. Consul Glass, in that instance, become not only responsible for their strawberry or vanilla line of glass container, but they separately become responsible and have to separately register as a producer for the customized container and have a separate agreement for disposal for that customized container. In other words, we are saying that under no circumstances does where the regulation relate to a brand impinge on the filling company or our members, our manufacturers. It still is a brand in relation to the manufacturing of the container, not in the manufacturing of the filler. And that's the only gray area of the regulation that's left to be resolved.
Aggie?
Yeah, well, I've got a small little question. Okay, I'm a consumer and my wife goes shopping at Checkers and she's got about 1,000 these plastic bags. Then we got to take this thing back to Checkers and say, you dispose of these plastic bags. We don't want them anymore. You do what you, and then Checkers has to then get hold of the supply of the bags, who then will get hold of the disposal company. And that's how it's going to work with regard to that. Am I correct in saying that?
Aggie, you're completely correct. Can you remember back in the days when we used to collect the soda water and the Coca-Cola bottles, take it into the corner shop, and they would give us 10 cents for a bottle?
Yeah, that's quite right. Yeah,
that's exactly the mechanism that the regulators are now trying to enforce. Not that you get money back for the plastic bags or whatever, but that there is an incentive from the producer. There is an incentive to the consumer to return the used cartons back to a central point for recycling, rather than just to put them into the waste disposal site.
Yeah. Now my second question is: we manufacture paint, we supply a certain retailer, call it whoever it is, let's call it Checkers again, and we supply them, and then I go along and I buy a whole lot of drums of paint, 5 liters of paint, and I store it because it's a good price, and I store it for future use. And after 5 years, I haven't used it, and the stuff's starting to smell, and now what do I do with those things? I have to take it back to the manufacturer, to the retailer, whoever I bought it from, and they're going to contact who they contact is a plastic manufacturer, but it's full of paint that has gone off. Let's just say the guys haven't used the right biocides.
So Aggie, in response
Oh.
to you, my response to you is exactly what I said to one of the previous people, and that is that the waste disposal solution is a solution which applies to the container, whether the container is full or empty. In other words, the producer takes accountability for the cans recycling, whether it is half full, full, or empty.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but it's going to be a big, it's a lot of responsibility of the producer of the packaging to take back all this stuff and then decide how they're going to get rid of the stuff inside the cans.
Absolutely. And I think what's very important is this, that implied, not written into the regulation, but implied is that it is not the responsibility of the filler to find a way of disposing, which is normally into the drains system, to find a way of disposing of the content which is being scrapped, but that in fact it is the responsibility of the packaging producer ultimately at the end of the day.
Oh, that's all very good and well, and I hear what you're saying, but in a country like ours where things are just, people don't seem to care about how they dispose of stuff, it's going to be one big exercise.
Well, let's just walk this thing to its logical conclusion, because you're completely correct. But then SAPMA bears a responsibility to make sure that Aggie tells his customers that where you have a need to dispose of the content of this can, please close the can and dispose of the can itself. The final waste disposal company will take care of the content. In other words, don't pour it into our water reticulation system. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but as long as you exhaust your obligation to say it, what the customer ultimately does with it is not your responsibility as the manufacturer.
I agree 100%. I agree with 100%. It's just the workings of the issue.
Sure. Sorry, there are two other hands.
I only see one other hand besides Aggie's.
Oh, Singi.
It's nearer again, Ivor. So it's fine. I'm just playing through the three scenarios that we have in our internal business, right? And apologies if it sounds fairly operational, but I think we just need to be clear in terms of roles and responsibilities of the different parties, right? The one area that I'm not 100% confident on is what you marked as an exception. And I joined late, and I'm sure this was discussed previously. So the scenario is that us as a paint manufacturer will import in either from a sister company or from a total third party, a fully fledged packed paint. So it's an imported product with an imported can, an imported formulation. We bring it into South Africa and we sell it off into our market. Am I to understand that by virtue of the fact that it's flagged as an exception, that there's no registration or anything responsible?
No, quite the contrary. Because,
okay, right.
because you are bringing that paint tin into the country, you from a foreign producer or a foreign manufacturer who cannot be held accountable in South Africa, you therefore are the accountable party. You have to register as the producer.
Okay.
And you have to be accountable for signing up with a waste disposal solution for that product once the consumer is finished with it.
Okay, all right. Okay, Sean, that's something we need to have a firm grip on, eh? Because I think that's definitely a loophole for us.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, got it. Okay, thanks, Ivor. Okay.
No, thank you. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I hope we've made it clear that while we're not responsible for these regulations, we want to make sure that we buffer our manufacturing and supplying members as much as we can and make sure that we exhaust our obligation without you, incurring additional liability. And so we are going to spend time between now and the end of January, end of February, bringing you the kinds of solutions that will make it possible for you to have exhausted your obligation. What we are going to require, however, is that where you have a producer of packaging, that you bring pressure to bear on that producer to register with whatever we put into the marketplace as a scheme of management and control, and that the producer brings pressure to bear on whoever the waste disposal company is that they contract with, so that we can hold both the producer and the waste disposal company responsible and accountable for what they do with your product or your finished container that still has your brand on it, possibly, what they do with it to make sure that we satisfy Section 18 requirements of the department. And then the second stage of our activity will eventually be where we have all of the verification certificates of all of the producers and all of the waste disposal plants on our website, where once you have subscribed to that system on our website, you have access and you can pull those down and you can link them into what your point of sale material for your client. The code, the QR codes that we will make available to you are simply to illustrate the code for the producers, the code for the disposal plants, and the public charter as a sector that we are undertaking to fulfill. So I hope that makes it clear, and I hope you've found some joy in this discussion. Thank you so much for Tara. I take it we've covered everything.
Yes, I think everything is covered. Unless there's any further questions, I will send out the documentation that's been forwarded to me, just with clarity, and also with frequently asked questions on the regulation as well, that have come through from the department.
And we can also send a link then to this discussion. We can also send a link then to this discussion once it's packaged. Good. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Ava.
Thank
you, Ava.
Bye, guys.
Ava, thanks, Tara.